Story of the World, Volume 3, Chapter 15, A New World in Conflict. Part 3, William Penn's Holy Experiment. While the colonies in New France and New England fought for survival, a man named William Penn was working hard to build a different kind of colony. Penn wanted this new colony, Pennsylvania, to be a place of peace, brotherhood, and love, not a place of war. But the history of Pennsylvania was filled with trouble. The story of Pennsylvania began in 1660, when William Penn was just 16 and studying at the University of Oxford. The English had just decided to invite Charles II back to England. William's father, an officer in the English Navy, commanded the ship that brought Charles II back to England. In gratitude, Charles II made William's father an admiral and a knight. And when Charles II was crowned in London, Admiral Penn loaned him £16,000 for his treasury, more money than a farmer or merchant might earn in his entire lifetime. Admiral Penn wanted William to have a position at the new royal court, perhaps as an ambassador or army officer. But in Oxford, William had started going to the meetings of a religious group called the Society of Friends of the Truth. The Friends were nicknamed Quakers because people whispered that they quaked or shook in the presence of God. Quakers refused to belong to the Church of England. Instead, they gathered together in plain meeting houses where they sat and prayed quietly, waiting for God's words to come directly into their hearts. Quakers believed that every man and woman should be equal. So they refused to use the word you because in those days, people used the word you when talking to superiors and the word thee when talking to equals. Quakers used thee when speaking to everyone. They wouldn't even take their hats off in the presence of the king. This looked a lot like rebellion, so Quakers were often arrested and put into jail. Admiral Penn didn't want William to become a Quaker, so he ordered William to come home from Oxford and sent him to France instead. In France, William met Louis XIV and learned French dress and French manners at the glittering, beautiful French court. When he returned, he seemed content to live the life of a wealthy aristocrat. He went to parties and balls. He decided to become a soldier and even had his portrait painted in a full suit of armor. But while William was playing the part of a fashionable young man, he was still thinking about Quaker ideas. Soon, William Penn was going to Quaker meetings once more. At the age of 22, sitting in a Quaker meeting, William Penn was suddenly filled with joy. "The Lord visited me," he later said, "with a certain sound and testimony of his eternal word." Now, William could no longer be a soldier. Quakers believed that fighting was wrong, and he certainly wouldn't be a royal ambassador. Quakers were not in favor at court. When Admiral Penn found out that his son had become a Quaker, he was so furious that he threw William out of the house and told him not to come back again. William Penn went to live with friends in London. He wrote tracts defending Quaker beliefs, preached in public, and was thrown into jail. When he was released, he learned that his father was dying. William Penn hurried home to sit by his father's side. 10 days later, Admiral Penn died. William spent the next 3 years writing and thinking about Quaker ideas. Meanwhile, all over England, Quakers were put in jail because of their beliefs. William Penn knew that, over in North America, Puritans had formed colonies where they could worship as they pleased. Why couldn't Quakers have a colony as well? So William wrote to Charles II, reminding the king that he still owed the Penn family £16,000. He asked for the king to pay him back, not with money, but with land in North America. Charles II agreed, and he insisted that the land be called Pennsylvania in honor of William's father. In 1681, he gave William Penn a piece of land on the western bank of the Delaware River for his very own. The land was almost as big as the entire country of England. William Penn planned to use this land for a colony where Quaker ideas would be followed. He wanted the settlers to be like brothers, all equal to each other. The capital city would be called the City of Brotherly Love. In Greek, Philadelphia. The colonists would govern themselves. To help them, he wrote out directions called the Frame of Government that explained how the colony would run. Colonists would vote to elect 3 groups of leaders: a council, an assembly, and a governor. The council would make laws, the assembly would vote on whether or not the laws should be passed, and the governor would make sure that laws were followed. That way, no one group of people would have all the power. Later, this frame of government would be a model for the American Constitution. William Penn didn't forget about the Native Americans either. He sent them a message promising to pay them for any land that the colonists used. In the directions for his new colony, he wrote, "No man shall by any ways or means, in word or deed, affront or wrong any Indian. The Indians shall have liberty to do all things that any of the colonists shall enjoy." In 1682, William Penn himself came over to Pennsylvania, bringing 100 colonists with him. In the next year, 23 different ships arrived one at a time, bringing new settlers, 2,000 in all. But the governor of Maryland, the colony just south of Pennsylvania, watched Pennsylvania's growth with alarm. He thought that the Pennsylvania colonists were settling on land that ought to belong to Maryland. Just 2 years after William Penn's arrival, the Maryland governor announced that he was going to sail to England and asked the king to give him part of Pennsylvania's land. William Penn didn't want to leave his colony so soon, but he had no choice. He had to follow the Maryland governor back over to England and defend Pennsylvania's right to its own land. So, sadly, he boarded a ship and set out on the long journey across the Atlantic. He would not return for 15 long years. When he arrived in England, he found that Charles II was too ill to see him. Not long after, Charles II died, without leaving a son behind him. His brother, James II, claimed the throne instead. But James II was Catholic. The people of England were horrified. Did this mean that England would become a Catholic country? And then, something even more alarming happened. James II and his wife had a son. They planned to raise their little boy to be a good Catholic, and James's heir. Now, England might be facing a whole dynasty of Catholic kings. The English Protestants revolted. They sent a message to James's older daughter, Mary, who lived in Holland. Mary was a Protestant, and she had married a Dutch nobleman, William III of Orange. Both were Protestants. "Come to England and seize the throne," the English Protestants pleaded. "Be king and queen, and deliver us from Catholic rule." William and Mary agreed to come. They also agreed to sign a paper, promising that they would not try to pass any laws without the approval of Parliament. In November of 1688, they sailed to England along with 14,000 Protestant soldiers. As soon as they landed, James's royal army deserted him and welcomed the new Protestant rulers. James, like his brother before him, had to flee to France. The Protestants of England were delighted. They now had a Protestant king and queen who had promised not to be tyrants. The English called this takeover the Glorious Revolution. Their new monarchs, Mary II and William III, would never try to seize power from Parliament. But the revolution wasn't so glorious for William Penn. He was arrested 3 times because he was suspected of loyalty to the king. Each time he was released, he tried to get a ship to take him back to Philadelphia, but he always failed. Finally, he was forced to go into hiding. He stayed in hiding for years and years. Finally, when fears of James II's return began to die down, William was able to come out of hiding and buy passage on a ship to North America. When he walked down its gangplank in the harbor of Philadelphia, he could hardly believe his eyes. In 15 years, Philadelphia had grown to be the second largest town in all of North America. The city was filled with shops, tall brick houses, wide streets, and thousands of people. His holy experiment had succeeded. Today, a statue of William Penn stands on top of Philadelphia's City Hall. The statue is 37 feet tall. For many years, no building in Philadelphia was allowed to be taller than the brim of the statue's hat, so that William Penn would always be at the highest spot in the city that he had planned. Was a success. Today, a statue of William Penn stands on top of Philadelphia's City Hall. The statue is 37 feet tall. For many years, no building in Philadelphia was allowed to be taller than the brim of the statue's hat, so that William Penn would always be the highest spot in the city that he planned.